right. I wish they would have it in pharmacy. I like the number. Stuff like or twice a week. Well, good morning. Glad that you are here with us this morning. A couple of announcements. Our golfers did well, tied for first place, or finished in second place with a scorecard runoff, playoff.
Playoff, what they call it. Two got 67.
You know, that was Jesse and Ethan, by the way, that represented us. That's right. Yeah. There is a sign up for the blood drive out in the foyer, both to give blood and also to help in some way. There is a meeting immediately following morning worship service in here. If you'd like to be on the outreach committee, just stay for a few minutes after services. Anything? Oh, tonight there's a gospel meeting at the Marian congregation. If you'd like to go, I believe tonight is at 5 o'clock. If you're interested at all, we'd love to have a representation from here. Go over there and help support their efforts. Anything else that needs to be announced? Okay, we are studying what?
Ten Commandments.
10 Commandments. There you go.
One of them.
Well, we're studying one of them this morning. That's right. Which one? Number 8. A while back, I was in the checkout line at Aldi's. You ever shopped at Aldi's? It's different.
I go to the shrimp every quarter.
Yep. The first time I went, I refused because I didn't know you got your quarter back. I was not going to pay a quarter just to get a shopping cart. I turned around and went and got in my car and went somewhere else till someone explained to me, no, you get it back. But I was in the checkout line at Aldi's, and I watched as the cashier finished ringing up a gentleman's groceries. Of course, you move your cart over to another area to bag of groceries. And about halfway through, he discovered he had something in his cart. I think it was some garlic or something, and he stopped what he was doing, pulled out his receipt, and saw that they didn't bring it in. And somehow he knew it was hidden there in his cart or something, and they had not charged him for it. So he went back to the cashier, told her he hadn't paid for it, and we could all tell she was just in absolute surprise that somebody would come back and pay for something that they, that had slipped through. Well, after observing, there was a young couple in front of me asked the cashier if they could pay for it. Whatever this was, garlic or something that the guy had gone through, and the woman walked over to the man and handed it to him because he just brought it back to her, but she walked it over and said, nobody should be without garlic, or green beans, or whatever it was. And that made me smile, so after I paid for mine, I went over to the couple and thanked them for what they did. Told them I was impressed with their spirit of generosity. They rewarded him for his integrity, basically. In a world where stealing is common, this Aldi shopper was committed to keeping commandment number 8, which says,
Thou shalt not steal.
Thou shalt not steal. Do not steal. Exodus 20 and verse 15. The Hebrew word for steal means to quickly carry something away by stealth. That's the meaning. To quickly carry something away by stealth. It's the idea of deceitfully appropriating someone else's property without permission. When you translate it into Greek, it becomes the word, take a guess. Klepto. Klepto. From which we get
Kleptomaniac.
kleptomaniac, one who steals or constantly steals. So that's the word in the Greek. A few observations. First off, just like all the others, this command is directed to every individual. The tense is second person singular, meaning everyone should take it to heart. It means you, it means me, it means everyone without exception. Secondly, it is comprehensive. Don't steal anything from anyone at any time. There are no exceptions. Just don't do it. Thirdly, it is also in the form of the strong negative, which I believe 7 others are also in the strong negative, or is it 8? I believe it's 7. Yeah, 7 of the other commands. It is an unconditional prohibition. Thou shalt not ever. You could add that word in there. How would you say it positively? If you were to turn it around and say it in the positive, how would you say it?
Respect others' property.
Respect others' property. That's one way. Any other? Instead of take something, give something. Be generous. One of our problems with this very simple and straightforward command is we think it doesn't apply to me always. Well, we'll see about that. But before we go any further, let's review where we've been in this class and where we're headed. Just reviewing the 10, if you have one of those little bookmarks. Number 1, there is one God. Number 2, no idols. Number 3, revere His name, God's name. Number 4, remember to rest. Number 5, honor your parents. Number 6, do not murder. 7, do not commit adultery, or literally, no adulterating. Number 8, no stealing. Number 9, no lying. Number 10, do not covet. When we get there, we will have the last class where we will look at what Jesus did with the 10 Commandments. Remember in the Sermon on the Mount? He said, I know you have heard this, but here's what it means, so do this, the meaning of it, not just the letter of the law. Well, to understand the prohibition against stealing, we're going to have to establish some principles. There are at least 4. Number 1, why should you not steal? Because number 8 says not to. And also because God owns everything. Psalm 24 and verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. He owns everything, so if you steal something, who are you stealing it from? Number 2, everything we have is a gift from God. 1 Corinthians 4:7 asks the question, what do you have that you did not receive? Remember Job? Who are you? What did you make? What did you come up with on your own? And it's rhetorical. The answer is
No.
nothing. Absolutely nothing. So everything we have is a gift. And number 3, we have to respect the property of every person. That is a command that presupposes the right for people to have private property. Listen to what God says in Isaiah 61 and verse 8. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery Of course, he goes on and explains some other things. But that presupposes God understands people will have personal, private property. And he says, I hate it when people steal from each other. So he made it one of the 10. Number 4, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So be a giver, not a taker. Instead of stealing, why don't we try sharing? Ephesians 4:28, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. All right, so those are some principles that establish this 8th of the 10 commandments. And the main idea I want to get across today, write this down if you get nothing else. When we steal, we take from the person who possesses it, but also from the God who owns it. You're not just stealing from someone else, you're also stealing from God. So treat people and their property with respect. In a survey by the Barna Group, 86% of adults, that's 8.5 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10 adults claim they have kept this command. Never stolen anything. But I bet they score low on the line. Somebody's not telling the truth. And that's next week's topic. Stealing is the most common crime in our country. In fact, you list the top 4 crimes committed in the United States. Number 1 is theft. It makes up over half, it's 60%.
Wow.
Number 2 is burglary. What is burglary?
That's it.
Basically theft. You're just breaking in somewhere to steal it. Number 3 is aggravated assault. And number 4, robbery. What is robbery?
3 out of 4.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what the distinction is between the 3, but 3 out of 4 of the top 4 crimes in the United States violates the 8th commandment. Now, before we look at some common ways that we do steal from people, let's consider why we do it. I'm reminded of an early episode of the Bob Newhart Show. Playing a psychologist, a psychiatrist, one, I can't remember. Newhart was counseling a kleptomaniac played by the Fonz, Henry Winkler. And he started by asking the question, now why do you take things that don't belong to you? He answered, you remember? Because I want to, because I can. Well, I think there is that reason, because I want it, because I can. But there are 2 other reasons why people steal. Number 1, there is a discontent with what you already have, with what God has given you. You want something else. So you take it. And number 2, there is a distrust in the providence of God. I am not certain that God will, through His providence, allow me to have this. So I'm just going to take it. I mean, we all want something for nothing. Just yesterday at breakfast, we're sitting there enjoying our pancakes and bacon, and Karina says, I wonder if we download the app, we'll get something free. Sure enough, piece of pie. We all want something for nothing, right? I'll take pie any day for breakfast. I heard about a man who tried to sell his boat and trailer for $500, didn't get any offers. So he changed the sign to say, boat for $500, free trailer. Sold the next day. All right, stealing from people. Let's look at some ways that we steal. And then in a few moments, we'll consider how we steal from God, time permitting. What was last week's topic?
Adultery.
Adultery is a form of stealing, is it not? It's no accident commandment number 8 follows number 7. It's a sinful act. It robs the marriage covenant, the sacred vows between husband and wife. We don't often think of it in those terms, but many, if you break one of the commandments, you break all of them, several others at least. Adultery is a form of stealing, taking someone's innocence. It can happen through immorality, it can happen through abuse, it can happen, of course, in other ways, but that is stealing. Theft. I mean, that's the obvious. Theft is taking someone else's property without permission. Things got so bad recently in several towns, San Francisco one, that Target and Walgreens began closing at 6 p.m. This is back when the rioting and looters were going on. Looting. Looters were captured on video ransacking a Neiman Marcus, running out of the store with their hands full. I was just reading, many hotels are starting to sew microchips into their towels. Why? One company called Linen Tracking Technology provides these chips to over 2,000 hotels. You know, we all have taken something, whether it be a piece of gum when you were a kid, or looked over at someone else's answers on a test at school, or had somebody else help you with homework. You know, at some point in time, we're all guilty. This is one that has gotten us all. Shoplifting. According to the National Association of Shoplifting Prevention, more than $13 billion worth of goods are stolen from retailers every year.
Wow.
I was in a store this week, decided to do some class research. So I asked I don't know if she was the owner or the employee, I said, you have trouble with shoplifting? She looked at me and said, we have security here. I mean, I think she thought I was facing the joint or something. These are the obvious. Burglary. Burglary just involves breaking into a structure to steal something. I was watching the news this week. Someone was driving through parking lots looking for purses at churches. And that happened in several churches, where we had to put security out in the parking lot because, well, it's kind of a good time to start looking for unlocked doors. Stealing from employers. USA Today reports 48% of all American workers have taken something from an employer. Office supplies, adding expense reports, laziness, cheating on time cards, we go on and on. Is that included? Do not steal? Sure it is. Refusing to work. Now I understand some are not able to work because of a disability, or maybe they're retired, or could be other reasons, but many can work but choose not to. Is that stealing?
Mm-hmm.
2 Thessalonians 3, beginning with verse 10. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, don't what? Don't let them eat. But we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and earn their own living. I think it's a form of stealing. False measures. Deceptive practices. A form of stealing. 1936, a painting by Leslie Thrasher appeared on the Saturday Evening Post. It showed a butcher and a woman wanting to buy a chicken. And the butcher has his finger on the scale to make it weigh more. The customer is pushing up on the scale from underneath to make it seem lighter. Proverbs 11:1 says, "A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight." That was a problem with the Israelites for thousands of years. Being deceptive in the way they measured out things. God did not like it. Lying on your taxes. Uh-oh. Starting to get personal now. I'm reminded of the man who wrote a letter to the IRS. He said, "I can't sleep. My conscience is bothering me. I've written a check for $50. If I can't sleep, I'll send the rest." Romans 13:7 says, "Pay to all what is owed to them. Taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed." What about gossip? Spreading rumors. Is that stealing?
Someone's good name.
Someone's good name. According to Proverbs 11 and verse 9, you rob someone of their reputation by passing along gossip. It says, "With his mouth the godless man would destroy his neighbor, but by knowledge the righteous are delivered." Well, you may disagree with some of these. You may think it's getting too technical. Just remember that Jesus said, "Don't take me literally word for word. Figure out what it means and go with that." Now, what are the consequences of stealing? Well, here are two. When you steal, you often lose what you've gained. Proverbs 13:11. Wealth obtained by fraud dwindles, but the one who gathers by labor increases it. Stealing will bring shame. Jeremiah 2:26. As a thief is shamed when caught, so the house of Israel shall be shamed. When you steal, you're taking from the person who currently possesses it, but you're also stealing from God who owns it. When you trust in God and His providence, you treat people and their property with respect. So we've looked at some ways that perhaps we steal from people. How do we steal from God? I don't think I put these on the screen. If you withhold something that's His and don't do with it what He would have you to do, is that stealing from God? The eighth commandment isn't only about stealing. It is really about stewardship. We're going to give an account to God for how we have managed what He has entrusted to us. We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. We'll all be held accountable on Judgment Day, which, by the way, is the theme for the gospel meeting in Marion this week. I put it in the bulletin. Something about preparing for Judgment Day or getting ready for Judgment Day or something on the very back page, down at the bottom.
Preview of the judgment.
A preview of the judgment, yes. How about giving God your time? If you don't give Him the time He is blessing you with, is that stealing from Him? On the way to church this morning, you may have passed by a golf course. It might be packed with people. I don't know if it was this morning with rain or wet ground or whatever. You may have passed soccer fields filled with players and stands overflowing with fans. Or parks, people. You get to church and there's just a handful. I have two thoughts. First, I have a very hard time believing people when they say, I don't go to church on Sunday, it's my only day to sleep in. The Greek word for that is baloney. Secondly, COVID has convinced me that many in our culture, including Christians, are more committed to playing than praying and praising. We were looking for an excuse. I'm not saying if you stay home you have an excuse. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it has convinced me that worship does not mean nearly as much to us as we thought. And did you know 20% of churches have closed their doors because of COVID? 20%. Across the board in Christendom did not survive COVID. Are we giving God our time? I'm not just talking about church services. I'm glad that our services are live streamed, that we are able to help those that cannot be here worship and feel like they are a part of it. It's a way for us to live out our mission and reach those who aren't able to be here in person. And I recognize there's still a lot of uncertainty, even though the numbers are dropping quickly. So the news said yesterday and today. Health concerns make it difficult to worship in person. I understand that. I'm not trying to say that there isn't a valid reason or fear, but I am concerned that some who could gather in person have chosen not to. Because they've gotten into the habit of watching from home instead of engaging in worship with God's people. I read an article this week, I'm going to put this up there, out of Christianity Today. It was called Why Church Can't Be the Same After the Pandemic. There was one sentence in the article, I don't know if you can read that, I didn't pick a very good color. It says, the immediate challenge is to get people to see the church as a community requiring their involvement rather than as content to consume on your own. A problem that is widespread even before COVID-19 struck. We treat it as a buffet rather than something we give to God. We get out of the habit of gathering in person with God's people, and we allow other habits to take the place. I want you to listen for the use of phrases one another and meet together in Hebrews 10:24. Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. Well, here's an action step. If you have been blessed by gathering in person, give a call out and encouragement to someone who has not come back yet. But be understanding if someone has valid fears and valid reasons. We're not trying to get somebody to go against what they feel is for their safety. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about someone who's just gotten into the habit of not being there. Number two, if God has blessed us with treasure and we do not give a rightful portion back to Him, is that stealing? God asked a question. Malachi 3 and verse 8. Will a man rob God? You are robbing me. You ask, how have we robbed you? In your tithes and offerings. What does the word rob mean?
Take from.
To take from, but it's slightly different. In other words, how is robbery different from stealing? The way you spell it. The way you spell it, okay.
Is robbery a planned event?
A planned event. Taking it by force.
Mm.
You've taken it by force.
Mm.
The people didn't like the accusation God made against them. I mean, how can they be stealing from God, especially robbery? How are we taking it by force? Who is God?
Our Creator.
Our Creator. The Sovereign. He rightfully rules. He is omnipotent. The Sovereign God. The Alpha and the Omega. He commanded His people, I would like for you, no, that's not the right terminology. He didn't say I would like for you. What did He say?
You will.
Give to me 10% of everything that you have. A tenth. When they didn't do that, He accused them of robbery. Taking it by force. Verse 9 says He put the whole nation under a curse. You are cursed with a curse, for you've robbed me. The whole nation, all of you. Now we are not under that same obligation in the new covenant. The tithe or the 10%. But how many times have we struggled in our heart, complained in our heart about giving to God? Or withholding what is His? Look at the first part of verse 10. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse. That there may be food in my house. What's the storehouse? It was a certain room in the temple. Actually, it was basically the bank in the temple. I want you to bring the tithes, put them in the storehouse, which is a special room in the temple that acted basically like a bank or a safe. Bring me your tithes, put them in the storehouse so that there may be food in my house. And try me. We're going to come to that part in just a moment. A couple of summary statements about giving today. We're not under that law. We're not under the tithing law. But it's a good benchmark. Good place to start. Kind of like a minimum guide. A yardstick, a ruler. Something to measure by. It's a good reminder. God is my God. If he has required some to give 10%, does he require me? Well, require is not the right word. But it does remind me of who God is, that he owns everything, and he's asked me to give something back. 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 2. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up, as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come. What do we learn from that passage? Plan it.
You also find out that from the old covenant to the new covenant, there is still responsibility in giving.
Yes, there is still the commandment to give. The commandment didn't change.
We like to water it down.
We like to water it down. I learned in there giving should be punctual, that you give on a regular basis. On the first day of every week, he said. Now, I'm not going to be nitpicky and say, if you give yours all at once, on one time a month or whatever. I don't think he's talking about that. I think he's just talking about with some regularity. Be punctual. Now, we have a box out in the lobby there, taking the place during COVID of passing trays up and down the aisle. You can give there. Currently, you can give by going to the website, although I don't think that's operating at the moment. I don't know if you've noticed, we lost our entire website, not due to us, but due to the host. They switched servers and we lost everything that was on the website. So you used to be able to give on the website, you cannot currently. But I also learned that giving is a personal thing in that passage. It is inherently individualistic. On the first day of every week, each of you very personal. It's also proportional. Give how? Each of you should give how? As you have prospered. Proportional means the more that God blesses you, the more you should give. The more you give, the more he blesses. Some have said, give according to your income, or God will make your income according to your giving.
That's scary.
Mm-hmm. Bring all the tithe into the storehouse if they're making food in my house, and try me on this. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, this is the only time God says, test me. Test me on this. If I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it. With whatever percentage I give, if it's 10% or another amount, what I'm saying is, God, I trust you with the rest. I'm giving this portion, and I'm trusting you with the rest. So the rest is basically a barometer of your faith. Many years ago, I was at a church. We launched a campaign. We wanted to pay off the mortgage on the building, put banners around the church with just 2 words. Prove me. This passage. Prove it. Test me. Prove me. Never forget the joy as we watched God bring in the finances to retire the mortgage. I still remember the Sunday we burned the note from the bank during a worship service. God says, test me. You found it to be true, I'm sure, in your own life. Well, I can think of a couple responses to this lesson. Again, last week was kind of a whipping. This week has been kind of a whipping, a beating. I apologize for that, but if you're going to study God's commands, sometimes it's that way. Two responses. One is repent. If the Spirit has convicted you about stealing from a person or from God Himself, just repent. Turn around, come back. And that's number two. Come back. Leviticus 6:4. If you've sinned and you realize your guilt, restore what you took by robbery and what you got by oppression. That was part of this command. If you've stolen something, make good on it. In the Belfast Revival, 1922-1923, converted to Christianity shipyard workers brought back so many tools they had stolen, the company had to build new storage sheds. After a while, the company put out a statement saying, please stop bringing back stolen goods. We don't have the room. But maybe there's a third response too. And that is receive. Don't have it up there. I find it fascinating. The Bible begins with thieves. Who were the first thieves? Adam and Eve. Genesis 3 and verse 6. They stole some forbidden fruit. God said, don't take it. But they did anyway. And that led to the fall of humanity. Later, God's people comes into the promised land. A man by the name of Achan. I used to preach a sermon called Achan Stole the Bacon. It wasn't bacon, but it rhymes. What did he steal? Essentials, food, clothing, gold, bars of gold and silver. He buried it in the ground underneath his tent. How did God react? First off, with Adam and Eve, how did He react?
He threw him out of Eden.
Kicked them out. How did He deal with Achan?
His whole family.
Killed his whole family. Joshua chapter 7. Fast forward, Jesus is being crucified, and He's crucified between
Two thieves.
two thieves. One of them repented, one of them didn't. One of them in Luke 23:41 says, we're receiving the due reward for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. We all deserve punishment, but we get grace instead. Any final thoughts? Don't steal my time by falling asleep in my sermon.
Ooh.
Actually, I don't care. If I can bless you with a good nap, I've done my good deed for the day. Thank you for coming to class. We'll take a short break. Gather into the auditorium for worship service in just a few moments. You are dismissed.